She didn't walk down the aisle. No music. No smiles. Just the sound of wheels rolling across marble floors. Her parents stood proudly beside her while the man they sold her to waited in silence. They called it marriage. But this was payment. And what happened after destroyed every single person involved. Her name was Mi-Rae, and she'd spent her entire life being grateful. Grateful to the parents who adopted her when she was 6 years old after the accident that left her in a wheelchair. Grateful for the medical care they provided. Grateful for the roof over her head. Grateful for every meal, every therapy session, every moment of their time. She said thank you so often it became reflexive. Automatic. Like breathing. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for not leaving me behind. Her parents reminded her constantly how much she cost them. Not cruelly. Not obviously. Just in passing comments that accumulated like stones in her chest. Do you know how expensive your medication is? We sacrifice so much to keep you comfortable. Other families wouldn't have taken this on. She absorbed it all. Believed that love was something she had to earn by being easy, uncomplicated, endlessly appreciative. She learned to make herself small. To need less. To apologize for existing in a body that required accommodation. And when her parents came to her room one night with red eyes and shaking hands, when they sat on the edge of her bed and told her about the debt, about the men they owed money to, about the offer that had been made, she already knew what they were going to ask. Because gratitude had been training her for this moment her entire life. They told her about the man. Powerful. Dangerous. Korean Mafia. A name people lowered their voices to say. He'd offered to clear their debt completely. To ensure their safety. To make all their problems disappear. In exchange for one thing. Her. Not as collateral. As a wife. Mi-Rae asked the question she already knew the answer to. Do I have a choice? Her parents didn't say no. They just cried. And in their silence, she understood. The decision had already been made. 3 weeks later she sat in a luxury hotel suite wearing a wedding dress she hadn't picked, surrounded by people she didn't know, about to marry a man she'd met once for 30 seconds. He'd looked at her without expression. Without warmth. Without anything that suggested he saw her as human rather than transaction. The ceremony lasted 11 minutes. No vows from her. No kiss. Just signatures on papers that made her belong to someone who'd purchased her like property. And as the wheels of her chair rolled across marble floors toward a future she hadn't chosen, Mi-Rae did what she'd always done. She smiled. She said thank you. And she pretended that gratitude could protect her from what was coming. Subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Because what you're about to witness over the next 15 minutes will show you that some families destroy their children with love. That some debts get paid with bodies. And that the cruelest prison is the one built from gratitude. Watch carefully. Because the smallest moments in this story are the most heartbreaking. The story everyone told about Mi-Rae's adoption was beautiful. Tragic beginning, hopeful middle, triumphant ending. The kind of story people shared at church fundraisers and charity galas. The kind that made audiences cry and write checks. She'd been 6 years old when the accident happened. A car crash that killed both her biological parents and left her with spinal injuries that meant she'd never walk normally again. She'd spent 8 months in a hospital. Then another 6 in a state-run care facility where overworked nurses did their best with too many children and not enough resources. The Kims had been volunteers there. A childless couple in their 40s. Financially comfortable. Socially respected. They'd seen Mi-Rae and felt called to help. That's how they told it. Called. Like divine intervention. Like destiny. The adoption process took 2 years. Paperwork. Home studies. Medical evaluations. But eventually Mi-Rae became theirs. Legally. Permanently. They threw a party. Invited everyone they knew. Posed for photos with their new daughter. Smiled for cameras while people praised their generosity. Their compassion. Their willingness to take on such a challenging child. Mi-Rae remembered that day. Remembered sitting in her wheelchair wearing a dress Mrs. Kim had picked out, being hugged by strangers who called her brave. Being told over and over how lucky she was. How blessed. How grateful she should be. And she was grateful. So grateful it hurt. Grateful that someone wanted her. Grateful that she had a home. Grateful that she wasn't alone anymore in a facility where children got forgotten. The early years were good. Or they seemed good. Mi-Rae couldn't always tell the difference between love and performance. The Kims took her to medical appointments. Paid for physical therapy. Enrolled her in a private school that had wheelchair accessibility. They bought her books and art supplies and everything a child could want. But there was always a cost. Not financial. Emotional. Every gift came with a reminder. Do you know how much this therapy costs? We could have used that money for a vacation. But we chose you instead. Every accommodation came with a sigh. It's so difficult finding restaurants with ramps. We have to plan everything around your needs. Every moment of care came with an unspoken debt. We gave up so much for you. The least you can do is be grateful. And Mi-Rae was grateful. Endlessly. Exhaustingly. She thanked them for everything. For food. For shelter. For existing in her life. She learned to apologize for needing help. For taking up space. For being the kind of daughter who required extra effort. She became the perfect grateful child. Quiet. Obedient. Never complaining. Never demanding. Always thankful. Always sorry. Always trying to be worth the investment they'd made. But gratitude became a leash. And the Kims held it tight. As Mi-Rae grew older, the reminders became more frequent. More specific. More pointed. We've spent over $200,000 on your medical care. Do you understand that? Other parents would have given up. But we stayed. Because we love you. The word love was always attached to sacrifice. Never to joy. Never to the simple fact of her existence. Always to what they'd given up to keep her. Mi-Rae started noticing things. The way her parents' voices changed when they talked about money. The stress that radiated from them during bill-paying sessions. The arguments that happened behind closed doors but leaked through walls. She heard her name in those arguments. Heard the costs associated with her care. Heard the resentment that her father tried to hide and her mother expressed in increasingly sharp comments. By the time Mi-Rae was 16, she understood something that made her chest tight. She wasn't their daughter. She was their project. Their public demonstration of virtue. Their excuse for financial struggles and social limitations. They loved her the way people loved difficult responsibilities. With martyrdom. With barely concealed burden. With the expectation that she owed them everything for the rest of her life. She tried to need less. Skipped physical therapy appointments claiming she felt fine. Stopped asking for new mobility equipment even when her wheelchair was falling apart. Ate smaller portions at dinner. Made herself as invisible as possible. Hoping that if she cost them nothing, they might finally just love her. It didn't work. Because the debt wasn't about money. It was about control. And people who use love as leverage never actually let you pay it off. The debt that destroyed them came from nowhere Mi-Rae could understand. Her father had made investments. Bad ones? Borrowed money from people who didn't use banks. Who didn't accept excuses. Who collected debts with methods that left bruises or worse. She didn't know the exact amount. Just that it was catastrophic. Life-destroying. The kind of number that made her father's hands shake and her mother cry at the kitchen table at 3 in the morning. They tried to hide it from her at first. Kept their panic behind closed doors. But walls were thin and fear was loud. She heard them talking about selling the house. About bankruptcy. About men who'd visited in the middle of the night. About threats that made her father's voice crack. She heard her own name. Heard them discussing her medical needs. Heard her mother say maybe we should have thought about this before we adopted a disabled child. Heard her father respond that it was too late for regrets. They'd made their choice. Now they had to figure out how to survive it. Then the meeting started. Men in expensive suits visiting their modest home. Sitting in the living room drinking tea while her parents' faces went pale. Mi-Rae stayed in her room during these visits. But she could feel the power imbalance through the walls. Could sense that her parents were no longer in control of their own lives. One name kept appearing. Whispered. Never spoken at full volume. Kang Dae-young. Korean Mafia. Import-export operations that everyone knew were covers for things you didn't ask about. Money laundering. Trafficking. Enforcement. The kind of man who made problems disappear. And who didn't negotiate. Her father owed him money. A lot of money. Money they couldn't possibly repay. Mi-Rae expected violence. Expected threats. Expected the kind of consequences she'd seen in movies. What she didn't expect was an offer. Kang Dae-young didn't want their house. Didn't want their car or their assets. He wanted something much more specific. He wanted a wife. And he wanted Mi-Rae. The night they told her, Mi-Rae was reading in her room. A novel about a girl who traveled the world. Who had adventures. Who was free. Her parents knocked. Came in without waiting for permission. Sat on the edge of her bed with expressions that made her stomach drop. They explained it carefully. Clinically. Like they were discussing a business transaction rather than her life. There's a solution. To the debt. To everything. A man. Very powerful. Very wealthy. He's offered to clear everything. To ensure we're safe. To make sure we never have to worry about money again. Mi-Rae already knew where this was going. Her chest felt tight. She couldn't breathe properly. What does he want? Her mother's voice was soft. Apologetic. But firm. He wants to marry you. The words landed like stones. Marriage. To a stranger. To a man old enough to be her father. To someone whose name made people go silent with fear. Mi-Rae looked at her parents. At the people who'd adopted her. Who'd raised her. Who'd told her she was chosen. Do I have a choice? The silence was answer enough. Her father tried to explain. It's not what you think. He's not cruel. He's just very powerful. You'd be taken care of. Protected. You'd live in luxury. You'd never want for anything. But would I be free? No one answered. Her mother reached for her hand. Mi-Rae pulled away. You can't be serious. You can't actually be asking me to. We're not asking, her father interrupted. His voice was harder now. We're telling you what needs to happen. This is the only way. If we don't do this, people will die. Do you understand? People will die. Mi-Rae felt the room spinning. You're selling me. That's a horrible way to put it. That's what this is. You're selling me to a criminal to clear your debt. Her mother started crying. We don't have a choice, baby. We're so sorry. But we don't have a choice. Mi-Rae looked at them. At the people who'd spent years reminding her what she owed them. And she understood. This was the bill. This was what all that gratitude had been building toward. Not love. Not family. Just a transaction that was always going to come due. Do you know how much we've spent on you? Do you know what we've sacrificed? This is the only way you can pay us back. The only way you can save us. Don't you want to save us? After everything we've done for you? Guilt was a weapon they'd been sharpening for years. And now they were using it. Mi-Rae could have fought. Could have refused. Could have run. But where would she go? Who would take her? A disabled girl with no money and no resources and nowhere to run. So she did what she'd always done. She nodded. She thanked them for taking care of her. And she agreed to marry a man she never met because gratitude had taught her that her life was never really hers to begin with. The wedding was arranged in 3 weeks. Fast enough that Mi-Rae couldn't change her mind. Couldn't find an escape. Couldn't process what was happening before it became permanent. She met Kang Dae-young once before the ceremony. He came to the house. Walked into the living room like he owned it. Which, in every way that mattered, he did. He was 42 years old. Tall. Well-dressed. Handsome in a way that made him more frightening, not less. Because monsters weren't supposed to look like this. He looked at Mi-Rae. Really looked. His eyes tracked her wheelchair. Her posture. Her face. She felt like she was being evaluated. Priced. He spoke to her parents. Not to her. The ceremony will be private. Small. I've arranged everything. She'll be well cared for. You have my word. Her father nodded gratefully. Her mother cried. And Mi-Rae sat in her wheelchair feeling like furniture being discussed by its new owner. Before he left, Kang Dae-young stopped in front of her. Bent down slightly. Made eye contact. His voice was quiet. Almost gentle. I'm not a good man. But I'm not cruel. You'll be safe. She didn't believe him. But she nodded anyway. The wedding day was surreal. A luxury hotel. Private room. Flowers everywhere. Photographer. Officiant. A handful of guests Mi-Rae didn't recognize. All of them watching. All of them pretending this was normal. Beautiful. Romantic. Mi-Rae wore a white dress. Custom made. Expensive. Beautiful. It didn't matter. She felt like she was drowning in fabric. The ceremony started. Music played. Her parents wheeled her down a makeshift aisle. Gave her away. Literally gave her away. Like property. Like payment. Everyone stood for the bride's entrance. Everyone except the bride. She sat in her wheelchair in a dress that cost more than her medical bills while strangers watched her become someone's wife. Someone's possession. Someone's property. There were no vows from her. The officiant didn't ask if she consented. Just read the legal requirements and had them sign papers. Kang Dae-young signed his name with steady hands. Mi-Rae's signature shook. The photographer took pictures. Her parents smiled. Relief visible on their faces. Their debt was cleared. Their lives were safe. And all it cost was their daughter. The reception lasted an hour. Champagne. Cake. Polite conversations. Mi-Rae sat at a table watching her parents laugh with relief. Watching them celebrate their salvation. Watching them pretend this was a joyous occasion instead of a funeral for her future. When it was over, Kang Dae-young wheeled her to a car. Helped her transfer. Folded her wheelchair with practiced efficiency like he'd been preparing for this. They drove in silence to a penthouse across the city. And Mi-Rae understood. Her life as she knew it was over. And she thanked the people who'd ended it. If you're still here, type I'm still watching in the comments. Because what happens next will show you that some prisons have silk sheets. That some monsters don't need to scream. And that the worst betrayals are the ones you're taught to call love. The penthouse was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Modern furniture. Art that probably cost more than her parents' house. Everything was accessible. Ramps instead of stairs. Wide doorways. A bathroom designed for someone in a wheelchair. He prepared for her. Had made accommodations. Which somehow made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't impulsive. Wasn't accidental. He planned this. Wanted this. Purchased her specifically. Kang Dae-young showed her to a bedroom. Large. Luxurious. With a bed she'd sleep in alone. I don't expect anything from you, he said. His voice was calm. Flat. Nothing physical. Nothing you're not comfortable with. This is a legal arrangement. Nothing more. Mi-Rae didn't understand. Then why? Why marry me? Why not just pay the debt? He didn't answer. Just told her where things were. Kitchen. Medical supplies. Emergency contacts. Then he left her alone. The first weeks were strange. He was there but not there. Present in the apartment but never intrusive. He worked constantly. Phone calls in Korean and English and languages she didn't recognize. Meetings that happened behind closed doors. Men in suits coming and going at all hours. He didn't talk to her beyond practical necessities. Didn't ask about her day. Didn't try to build intimacy or connection. He called her by her full name. Mi-Rae. Never wife. Never anything possessive. Just her name. Like she was an employee. A roommate. Someone he shared space with but didn't actually know. She had everything she needed. Food appeared in the kitchen. Medical supplies were restocked before she could run out. Physical therapy equipment was delivered. Books she hadn't asked for appeared on shelves. He was providing. Accommodating. Ensuring her comfort. But there was no warmth. No connection. She was cared for the way you'd care for an expensive possession. Maintained but not loved. Mi-Rae tried to understand. Tried to figure out why a man with money and power would marry a disabled girl from a poor family. Tried to make sense of an arrangement that made no practical sense. She asked him once. Over dinner. One of the few times they ate together. Why did you marry me? What do you get from this? He'd looked at her with eyes that showed nothing. That's not your concern. But I'm your wife. In name only. That doesn't entitle you to my reasons. The dismissal was absolute. She was part of his life but not privy to it. Owned but not included. The isolation was suffocating. She couldn't leave. Couldn't go anywhere without him arranging it. Couldn't contact her parents because the phone numbers she had no longer worked. They'd moved. Changed numbers. Disappeared into whatever new life her sacrifice had bought them. She was trapped in a golden cage with a man who treated her like an acquisition. Nights were the worst. Lying in bed in a room that wasn't hers. In a life she hadn't chosen. Listening to him move through the apartment. On the phone. Working. Existing in the same space but might as well have been on different planets. She thought about escape. About somehow getting out. But where would she go? She had no money. No resources. No one who would help. Her parents had made it clear she was on her own. And everyone else in her life had been left behind. This was her reality now. Beautiful. Suffocating. Permanent. The truth came out on a night 3 months into the marriage. Mi-Rae woke up at 2 in the morning hearing voices. Argument. Loud enough to carry through closed doors. She wheeled herself quietly into the hallway. Stayed in shadow. Listening. Kang Dae-young was on the phone. Speaking Korean. She understood enough to catch phrases. Names. Her parents' names. Then English. Clear. Angry. You thought you could steal from me and face no consequences? You thought I wouldn't find out? The money was never yours. You stole it. Tried to hide it. And now you're paying. Silence while someone responded. Then Kang's voice. Colder now. I don't want your money. I wanted you to suffer. And you will. Every day. Knowing what you did. Knowing what it cost. Mi-Rae's blood went cold. He continued. Your daughter is perfectly safe. Well cared for. But you'll never see her again. You'll never know if she's happy. You'll spend the rest of your lives knowing you sold her to save yourselves. And it won't even work. Because I'm going to take everything anyway. The business you tried to hide. The assets you thought were safe. All of it. You're going to lose everything. And the only thing you'll have left is the memory of your daughter's face when you told her you had no choice. He hung up. Stood in silence. Then spoke without turning around. You can come out now, Mi-Rae. She wheeled forward. Heart pounding. He turned. Looked at her. No apology in his eyes. No guilt. You were listening. Yes. Good. You should know. Her voice was shaking. Know what? That this was never about you. It was about them. What did they do? They stole from me. Years ago. Your father worked in one of my operations. He embezzled money. A lot of money. Thought I wouldn't notice. Thought he could disappear with it. Mi-Rae felt the room spinning. The debt. It wasn't. It was real. But it wasn't gambling or bad investments. It was theft. He took what was mine. Tried to build a life with stolen money. Then why marry me? Why not just take the money back? Because money isn't suffering. He stepped closer. I wanted them to pay. Really pay. Not with death. That's too fast. Too easy. I wanted them to live with what they'd done. Wanted them to know they sacrificed their daughter for nothing. Because I was going to destroy them anyway. You weren't the price. You were the mirror. Mi-Rae couldn't breathe. So what am I? What am I to you? You're my reminder. Every time they wonder where you are. Every time they think about what they did. I want them to imagine you here. With me. Paying for their sins. You're not my wife. You're my revenge. The words destroyed her. Not because they were cruel. But because they were honest. She wasn't a person to anyone. Not to her parents who'd used her as payment. Not to her husband who'd used her as punishment. She was currency. Leverage. A tool for other people's agendas. She'd spent her whole life being grateful. Being obedient. Being what everyone needed her to be. And it had left her here. Trapped in a penthouse with a man who'd married her to hurt someone else. Khan watched her process. Then did something unexpected. He knelt down. Put himself at her eye level. I'm sorry. For what? For using you. You didn't deserve this. Neither did you deserve them. But that doesn't make what I did right. Mi-Rae didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process an apology from someone who'd purchased her as revenge. Are you going to let me go? No. Why? Because if I do, where will you go? Back to them? They abandoned you. Sold you. Do you think they want you back? So I'm stuck here. He stood up. For now. But, and his voice was quieter, I meant what I said at the wedding. You're safe here. I won't hurt you. Won't use you. This marriage is legal, but it doesn't have to be real. You can have a life here. School. Work. Whatever you want. Just not freedom. Just not freedom. He walked away. Left her sitting in a hallway in a penthouse prison. Understanding finally that everyone in her life had used her. And the cruelest part was that the man who'd admitted it was the most honest person she'd ever known. 6 months into the marriage, everything collapsed. Mi-Rae woke up to sirens. Police cars outside. Khan was on the phone. Speaking rapidly. Urgent. She wheeled to the window. Saw men in suits. Badges. Warrants. They were raiding properties. Freezing assets. Making arrests. Financial crimes. Money laundering. Everything Khan had built was falling apart. He found her by the window. We need to move. Where? Somewhere safe. They can't know about you. He'd already packed a bag. Already arranged transport. They left through a service elevator. Got into a car driven by someone Mi-Rae didn't recognize. Drove to a safe house outside the city. Small. Plain. Nothing like the penthouse. They stayed there for 3 days while Kong made calls. Arranged things. Managed the destruction of his empire. On the 3rd night he told her what happened. Your parents tried to report me. Tried to claim I'd kidnapped you. Forced you into marriage. Thought they could use authorities against me. They didn't know I'd been preparing for this. Had evidence. Documentation. Proof that they'd sold you. That the marriage was legal. That they'd taken payment. Mi-Rae felt numb. So what happens now? To them? Everything. The house is gone. The money they got from me, frozen and seized as proceeds of crime. Their business licenses revoked. Their reputation destroyed. Everyone knows what they did. How they sold their disabled daughter. They're ruined. And to me? He looked at her. And for the first time she saw something in his eyes that wasn't cold. That might have been regret. You're free. What? I'm done. The revenge is complete. I don't need you anymore. I'm giving you a divorce. Full settlement. Enough money to live comfortably. Medical care secured for life. And this. He handed her papers. A trust fund. In her name. Controlled only by her. Enough money that she'd never need anyone again. Never owe anyone. Never have to be grateful to people who'd use it against her. Mi-Rae stared at the papers. Why? Why let me go now? Because you were right. You are stuck. And I made you that way. I used you the same way they did. Just more honestly. You deserve better than being someone's tool. She didn't cry. Didn't thank him. Just looked at the man who'd bought her as revenge and was now setting her free. Where will I go? Anywhere you want. I've arranged an apartment. Accessible. Safe. But if you want to go somewhere else, I'll help. Do I ever have to see you again? Not if you don't want to. What about them? My parents? What about them? Will they try to contact me? He smiled. But it wasn't kind. They can try. But I don't think they will. People don't usually reach out to the children they've destroyed. They'll spend the rest of their lives alone with what they did. That's punishment enough. 3 months later. Mi-Rae sat in her new apartment. Small. Hers. Accessible. Perfect. She'd enrolled in online university classes. Started therapy. Started building a life that didn't require her to be grateful, or obedient, or anything except herself. The money from the trust fund meant she'd never worry about medical care. Never have to depend on anyone. Never have to owe anyone anything. Her parents had tried to reach out. Once. A letter delivered through a lawyer. Begging forgiveness. Explaining they'd had no choice. Asking her to help them. Asking her to give them money from the settlement to rebuild their lives. She'd read it once. Then burned it. They taught her that love came with conditions. That family meant debt. That she owed them everything for existing. Now they were learning what it felt like to be powerless. To need help from someone who had no obligation to give it. She didn't forgive them. Didn't help them. Just moved forward into a life they'd sold her away from. Kang Dae-young had disappeared. She heard he'd left the country. Gone somewhere extradition couldn't reach. Built a new life doing whatever men like him did when one empire fell and they needed to build another. She didn't miss him. But sometimes she thought about their last conversation. About the fact that the man who'd bought her as revenge had been more honest about what she was to him than the parents who'd claimed to love her. About the fact that her freedom had come from the person who'd acknowledged he'd trapped her. Not from the people who'd spent years pretending her cage was kindness. They'd sold their adopted daughter to marry a cruel Korean mafia boss. But she wasn't the one who lost. She'd lost her parents. Lost her innocence. Lost years to people who'd used her. But she'd gained something more valuable. She'd gained herself. And for the first time in her life, she didn't owe anyone for it. She left in the same wheelchair she'd arrived in. But this time, no one was pushing. No one was controlling the direction. No one was reminding her what she owed them for allowing her to exist. They thought selling her would save them. Instead it freed her. And cost them everything. Subscribe for stories where cruelty hides behind love. Where the smallest betrayals leave the deepest scars. Where freedom sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. If this story made you feel something, drop a comment. Tell me, would you have forgiven them? And if you're here for stories that cut deeper than headlines, that show you the quiet ways people destroy each other, hit that subscribe button. Because some debts can never be repaid. Some families can't be forgiven. And some people are stronger than everyone who tried to break them.